Hey everybody, how's it going? We are going to continue reading The Magic Misfits, the second story. We are on chapter 25 today, and in the last chapter that we read, so Layla, there was a lot going on. So there are the Varalikas, who is this couple, a man and a woman, that Sandra had said at her show, during her psychic show, that they were related to Layla. They're like Layla's birth parents because Layla was adopted by the Vernons. But she also seemed under distress. She was like whispering to someone that she didn't want to do it. She said, I won't do it. But ultimately she ended up doing it. So then the Vernons, Mr. Dante Vernon, the other Mr. Vernon, Layla, and Carter all went to go meet with the Varalikas and this lawyer. And basically, while they're there, Carter realizes something. Well, Layla and Carter both realize something. Layla realizes that she doesn't have any physical features that look like the Varalikas. So, usually if you're someone's kid, you'll have some sort of features, whether you have the same eyes, the same nose, there will be some sort of resemblance. And Layla sees no resemblance. And then she asks them about her key, her special key that was left with her as a baby, which her biological parents would know about because they're the ones that left it with her. Well, the Varalikas knew nothing about it. So that told Layla, this is fake. This isn't real. These people are not related to me. While she's having that revelation, Carter realizes that he recognizes the humming coming from the lawyer in the back of the room. And he recognizes it from one of Bazo's frown clowns. So they're able to communicate with Morse code, the tap, dash, dash, dot, dot, dash, dash. And Mr. Dante Vernon picks up on this. And so he says, okay, it's time to go. So Mr. Dante Vernon, the other Mr. Vernon, Layla and Carter all get up, trying to head out the door when the two lawyers and the Varalikas block their path and say, you're not going anywhere. And they lock them in the basement, and they reveal themselves to be obviously not related to Layla. They're doing some scheme, some trick, for reasons that we're still kind of trying to figure out. But, and they asked, do you work for Bazo? Because Bazo's supposed to be in jail. And they say, no, we don't work for Bazo. Bazo was never really in charge. There was someone in charge above Bazo. So, they're bad dudes. They lock them in the basement. And while they're in the basement, they hear these bad guys upstairs talking about how they need to get to the shop and find the book, which is kind of our hint for what they want, why they went through this whole charade of pretending to be related to Layla. What were they trying to do? Well, they need to break into some shop and they need to get some book. What shop do you think they're talking about? And what book do you think they're talking about? So they take off, but the Vernons and Layla and Carter are still stuck in this basement. And Layla finally reveals her secret key to her dad's. And Mr. Dante Vernon realizes something. He recognizes that key. He says that was the key that they used to get into the tunnels underneath the town of Mineral Wells. So they actually are able to find a door to these tunnels in the basement that they're in. They move a bookshelf out of the way. They find this door that enters the tunnels under the town. But Layla says, well, the key didn't work. We already tried it. And Mr. Vernon showed them that they were actually using the key the wrong way. It was a trick key, and you were supposed to put it in backwards. So he puts the key in backwards, and they open it up, which is so exciting. So that was where we left off. But one thing to note is that we also learned that this key, Layla's special key that was left to her by her parents as a baby, was a key that belonged to the Emerald Ring, Mr. Dante Vernon's old magic club as a kid. So does that mean that someone from the Emerald Ring is related to Layla? I don't know. Anyway, as you can see, there was a lot of unpacking there. There's a lot of information. There are a lot of things going on right now. If you have any questions about what's happening in the story, because it's kind of gotten pretty complicated at this point, feel free to contact me and maybe we can talk about it a little bit, okay? Because I know there's a lot going on in the story right now. But here we are. We're on chapter 25. So they were just able to open the doors to these tunnels and they're going to escape. Hopefully, I suppose. I guess I'm assuming they're going to escape. We don't know for sure yet. Let's find out. All right, here we go. Chapter 25. The Vernon family hurried through the darkness. Mr. Vernon held the flashlight, directing the glow ahead of them. Carter clutched the map of the tunnels, trying to discern exactly where they were. The tunnel was several feet wide and almost 6 feet tall. Some parts of it looked as though they'd been carved out by ancient underground streams. The walls were smooth stone with scalloped edges near the top. Other parts appeared to have been hacked directly through the bedrock by bootlegger pickaxes. In some sections, wooden joists arced overhead, providing support against the weight of the earth. In others, the group had to step over piles of stone that had rained recklessly down from the ceiling over the years, weakening the structure. Layla stumbled over a post lying flat across the floor. There were iron rails running through the tunnel, wooden slats connecting them like train tracks. "Where did the Emerald Ring get the skeleton key, Dad?" Layla asked, her voice echoing out into the darkness. "Oh, didn't I say?" Mr. Vernon asked. But then he was quiet. "No," Layla answered. "You didn't say, Dad. You never do." "My apologies," he replied quietly. The other Mr. Vernon rubbed his back. "The truth is, I am sort of ashamed about where my old club got that skeleton key." "Ashamed?" asked Carter. "Why?" Mr. Vernon blurted out, "We stole it from Sandra's father." His statement echoed all around them. Slowly, it settled in Layla's mind, ripples of meaning meandering through her body. Questions flooded her brain. All this time she'd thought that what she wanted most was answers. Now she was terrified of finally learning them, more terrified than she was of the tunnel collapsing. Still, she asked him, Why did Sandra's father have the key in the first place?" "He was Mineral Wells' locksmith," Mr. Vernon answered simply. "He crafted a skeleton key, specially for the former mayor of Mineral Wells. Mr. Santos was also the man who built the metal doors that sealed up the bootlegging tunnels beneath the town. The mayor was worried about people crawling around down here and the passages collapsing, so he hired Santos to forge an impossibly strong lock that would keep out trespassers." "Trespassers like the Emerald Ring?" Carter asked. "Exactly." Layla and Carter glanced at each other, confused. They moved carefully onward, following Mr. Vernon toward what they hoped was the center of Mineral Wells, and another rusted door that Layla's key might unlock. "Unfortunately, what the mayor feared came to pass," Mr. Vernon went on. "But the only victim was the man trying to protect the town. Sandra's father died down here when one of the tunnels crumpled. She was devastated." "That's terrible," said Carter. Layla felt her face grow warm. "Poor thing." Mr. Vernon nodded. "Sandra was so distraught that she hid the map and the key from the rest of us in the Emerald Ring so that no one would ever get hurt in the tunnels again. You kids were clever enough to solve her riddle and uncover her long-buried secret." "But," Carter said, his brow furrowed, "none of that answers how Layla ended up with the key in the first place." Mr. Vernon glanced at his husband. "It's probably best to keep our voices down," said the other Mr. Vernon quickly. "If those clowns circle back to the law office and figure out that we've left the basement, we might give away our location." Mr. Vernon nodded again, then pointed toward a shadowy opening in the tunnel wall. The other Mr. Vernon went first, his shoulders hunched so he wouldn't bump his head on the low ceiling, listening for any hint of danger. As Layla followed Carter, she held her breath. She concentrated on maneuvering through the dark, even though she was unsure what might happen when they made it back to the light. Had Sandra Santos's father been the only person who had perished down here? Layla's mind whirled. What if they came across a skeleton, a real one this time? What if it started dancing like the one in the basement of the resort? And what about the spirits that Sandra had invited into the auditorium the previous night? What if they were still hanging around in Mineral Wells? Pebbles fell from a crack in the ceiling, and everyone froze, panicked that their next move might set off a perilous chain reaction. After a tense few moments, the pebbles stopped falling, and the group continued on carefully past the crack. When they came to a fork in the tunnel, Mr. Vernon pointed down a dark path. "This way, I think." "You think?" asked the other Mr. Vernon. Carter held the bootlegging map in front of the flashlight beam. "He's right. We're moving in the right direction." "Thank you, my boy." "Thanks to the bootleggers," Carter added. "And that the magic shop used to be a jazz club." On and on they walked. Ahead, Layla's papa paused. "Does any of this look familiar?" "It all looks the same, if that's what you mean," said her dad. "It's a bit of a labyrinth, isn't it?" This was not reassuring. Mr. Vernon seemed to realize that Layla's face was a mask of worry. "Then again, life is but a labyrinth that we must navigate blindfolded, is it not?" "A little on the nose," her papa responded, "but fair enough." Layla shushed them, frustrated that she suddenly felt like the parent. "There!" Carter shouted. Layla followed his gaze and noticed that the flashlight's beam had landed on what looked like a set of stone steps. At the top was another rusted door, hopefully the way out. Throwing caution to the shadows, Layla raced ahead, clutching her key in her fist. She felt around for the keyhole and then placed the butt end of the key inside. With a click, the latch released. When Layla pushed the door, it squealed and gave way. And that is the end of that chapter. So that one was a little short, but they were able to get into the tunnels and out of that basement that they were locked in. But we learned something. Layla wanted to know, and Carter wanted to know, how did the Emerald Ring get this key in the first place and get access to these tunnels underneath the city? And we learned the reason why Mr. Dante Vernon has been a little secretive about some of the things he did as a kid, and that's because him and his friends had actually stolen the key from Sandra Santos's father, who worked as a locksmith at the time, and he wasn't proud of that. He didn't want to tell Layla that because he wasn't proud of that. He knew it wasn't right, and so he felt shame from having done that as a kid, and so that's why he had been a little reluctant to tell her. But now she knows. But they also found out that Sandra Santos's these tunnels were dangerous. They had rocks that were collapsing. It's not a safe place for anyone to be hanging out. And the Vernons, Layla and Carter, are only going through them to escape from this locked basement where they were in trouble there. So they're using these tunnels, but they're not safe. Like, these tunnels aren't safe to be going around in. And so they found out that Sandra's dad had actually gotten hurt in these tunnels long ago. And because of that, Sandra had chosen to take the key and the map and all the clues about these tunnels and hide them away, lock them away, so that the Emerald Ring couldn't use them anymore. But that means, who was the only person who had access to the key? And how did it get from there to getting into Layla's bassinet as a baby? Interesting. I don't know. Curious. But they made it through the tunnels unharmed. It is a dangerous place to be, but they made it through safely. They were okay. And they got to the other side, and they found another door, and Layla unlocked it with the key, and she's opening the door, and that is where our chapter ends. Where do you think they come out? Do you think they made it to the magic shop, or do you think that supposedly there's lots of doors that lead to these tunnels through the town of Mineral Wells. Did they make it back to the magic shop, or are they going to come out at a different location? And if they did make it to the magic shop, are these frown clowns going to be there? I don't know. Well, we'll continue reading chapter 26 next time. I will see you then.
Bye, everybody.